A number of years back, I was teaching middle school, and one of the courses we taught was ethics. And ethics to an eighth grader is a very different thing. So we tried to establish what is the basis of ethics, not from a perspective of Christianity, not from a perspective of modern, postmodern, any of those, but just simply what is ethics. And we based all of this on the understanding that at its heart, ethics is trying to gain a reward and or avoid a punishment. So to begin, as you think about morality and Christian morality specifically, and Christian morality from the perspective of C.S. Lewis, how does that fit with the idea of seeking to gain a punishment or avoid a reward? At his heart, I'd say that Lewis would disagree with that whole general definition of morality. And you can see some of that in his chapter on morality and psychoanalysis, that for for Lewis, the aim of Christian morality is not to make the human, or as he calls it, the human machine, a better human machine, but to have us grow. The process that we normally discuss from the Christian perspective is that you have a series of steps along the way towards growing as a Christian. This begins with salvation. At salvation, we accept Christ. We then move through a period, or justification is what that's, sorry, the more common. It's early. Um, at justification, we accept Christ. We then move through a process of sanctification. Sanctification is where we grow closer to Christ. This is the journey upon which we basically spend our lives. And it's a journey where our morality shifts from that which we had learned to that which we live out as we grow more and more Christ-like. The ultimate goal of this is glorification. Glorification is where we are truly Christ-like, where we are without sin. And most Christians believe and hold that glorification is something that can only occur when we are united with the Lord at our final promotion to the church triumphant. But one of the pieces that it's important for us to think about from the psychoanalysis and the morality standpoint is that psychoanalysis can help us to understand the reasons behind why our morality is the way it is, but it won't fix our morality. Lewis gives the example of the men who are involved in overcoming their fears of whether or not they can fight. It doesn't change their morality as they go through the process of analyzing and figuring out what they have done, why they do it, but it helps them understand a piece of their morality. It helps them understand what's going on up here without necessarily changing what is here. Now, it's one of those interesting pieces because often what is being dealt with in psychoanalysis is not anything but how we do function in that standpoint of how do we avoid punishment or gain a reward. It's the great way to think of it is from the fear factor. How do we avoid those things that we fear? Or how are we rewarded by doing something that pushes us outside of our fear? That's where I really want y'all to think about and talk about from the perspective of that first chapter you're discussing today. I'm trying to scooch my notes forward to where I can get to the point that I want you to really just think about one piece from that second chapter, the one about sexual morality. Lewis uses often the comparison between sexuality and food consumption. Are those who are oversexed because of a preference or an availability? Just as people who overeat don't usually do it out of a sense of trying to survive starvation, but out of the sense of we have an abundance available. But what I want you to think through is the piece he gets to at the very end of the chapter. I've just got to find my note on this because my my Kindle is moving a little slow today. If anyone thinks that Christians regard unchastity as the supreme vice, he is quite wrong. The sins of the flesh are bad, but they are the least bad of all sins. All the worst pleasures are purely spiritual. The pleasure of putting other people in the wrong, of bossing and patronizing and spoiling sport and backbiting, the pleasures of power, of hatred. For there are two things inside me, competing with the human self, with which I must try to become. They are the animal self and the diabolical self. The diabolical self is the worst of the two. That is why a cold, self-righteous prig who goes regularly to church may be far nearer to hell than a prostitute. But of course, it is better to be neither. And with that, I also want y'all to think about what the true nature of sin is. What is the, Lewis did come from the Anglican tradition where there were venial sins and there were mortal sins. In Presbyterianism, we believe there is no such thing as the 7 deadly sins. There are not the 7 mortal sins that are guaranteed to have us condemned to hell. Rather, we all sin is bad. But what Lewis is trying to get to with this point is that the sins of the flesh, while they're bad, are not the ones that truly corrupt us so much as the sin that works in our mind, that comes from our heart. So I want you to think from that perspective, from these lines from Matthew chapter 15. Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth enters the stomach and goes out into the sewer? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and that is what defiles. For out of the heart comes evil intentions, murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. I know that's a shift from the idea of sexual morality into an idea of sin as a whole, but we need to think through these larger perspectives. Sin is sin. While there is not some sin that is mortal and some that is venial, there is all sin that leads us to that which we should not want to do. So I'm going to now try to push us just a little bit further into the idea of Christian marriage. Now, I do love that Lewis brings up immediately that he was not married. It's sort of like the old joke one of my a Catholic couple friend of mine said they couldn't understand going to premarital counseling with a priest who was saying that all of these things they're discussing are purely hypothetical to him. He didn't understand them because he had never been married. But the goal behind marriage, the goal is not for us to have our lives be given solely to our spouse. The idea is that we can find the way to work together as a whole, as to use that analogy that Lewis used earlier, the human machine. It's trying to get the two parts of the human machine to function as one, where we are united, stronger than one. So if you think through the passage from Ecclesiastes, and I can't remember the exact one off my hand, 2 are better than 1, for they shall have a good reward from their investment. When we are together, 2 people, we are stronger than we are separately. And that passage in Ecclesiastes ends with a line, a threefold cord is not easily broken. When we are truly at our heart, when our marriages are strongest, is when we are able to say that we function in that machine of husband and wife united with God. Well, folks, I'm sorry I can't give y'all more today. It's been one of those crazy weeks. As you probably know from talking to Mom and Dad, we had Grady Mom's funeral yesterday, and that's taken a lot more of my time this week than I had planned on. But I hope this helps y'all get some thinking going, and have a wonderful day, folks. Bye-bye.